Hey, what's up? I'm Jessel. I'm the producer for the Archivists, and today we're going to be doing a track breakdown for my track Little Ghost. So, without further ado, let's get into that. Um, for starters, first thing, I really wanted to go for a kind of intimate singer-songwriter meets dubstep vibe. So, really natural, organic versus really intense, really heavy, very bass-centered drops. Um, I'm just going to kind of go down the list. I'll tell you what I got going on, and we'll go from there. So, for starters, I think the main thing that this whole track really centers around is going to be this piano right here, which my friend actually wrote for me. Um, just really trying to set like a very intimate setting, especially with these vocals, which we'll get into in a bit. Just the kind of eerie haunting that they have behind them. I'm running reduce ambient to get rid of room noise. Ozone 10 looks like it is okay. So I have some EQ going on, some stereo imaging, and a dynamic EQ to just kind of tame a couple of the resonances that were coming out in the beginning. Some more EQ, compressor to flatten everything out, and then I'm the only real interesting thing that's happening is I'm doing gain automation at different parts of the songs to kind of keep it front and center. As for the ARP, same thing. It's just an ARP that's compressed, delay thrown on it. That's sounds like soloed out. Um, but real basic song starter stuff. But really the main focus was to lean into like this really dark, this really haunting vibe. Um, we open up with these little lower octave vocal shots and little shimmer layers and set the tone. This is just pitch down. This is just Valhalla shimmer. And getting into kind of the main meat of the verse here, we've got this vocal that comes in 4 bars in. Absolutely gorgeous voice. And for me, I really like a more traditional approach to processing and mixing. If it's not broken, don't change it. I'm doing Waves Real Time Tuner. I fucking love this thing. I am not a big Waves plugin fan, but as far as just chucking a last little bit of polish onto a vocal that's maybe just a little bit out here and there, I I love this thing. It's so good at what it does. It just works great. From there, we're going into an EQ to take the lows out into the classic 76 two-way setup, which I actually have them backwards here. This older print of the track, but this got corrected. 76 is taming transients, 2A is controlling body. Into de-essing, delay, and then reverb, EQ, standard stuff. Pretty classic vocal chain, but I really like what it does on female vocals specifically, so that's what I tend to go with. I'll let this play out for a second. Some more things here. As far as drums go, there's not too much that's really interesting. I've got a pretty basic little setup of filtered drums going here. And it kind of just really centers around the vocal through this section. The instrumentation's very out of the way, it's very subtle. And that takes us into this really cool orchestral section here, which some effects. I took a cinematic kind of sample loop and just cut it up to follow the vocal timing. Kind of doing like this little call and response back and forth with the piano and vocal through this orchestral section. Like I said, all this is just echoing back and forth. This is really just to give you a break, because in my opinion, after this long, that part of the song got boring. So I was like, how do I switch this up? How do I go for this really dark organic feel? And orchestral was the solution for that. Getting into the build, There's not too terribly much that's interesting. It's really a simple setup in the beginning. The build loop comes in. This is kind of the next time we get a new instrument added. String section comes in to set the tone for the drop. Kind of keep it interesting. Just every 4 bars trying to add a new instrument. This is just consisting of a couple different string layers that I made with native or contact with the session library, I believe it was, but got a nice mid-range string. Another viola to complement the violin. A little higher octave violin to kind of follow the melody a little better. Cello because everybody loves warm tones. And this thing is really cool. I use this instrument a lot when I want to add low into something, but I don't want to actually add a bass patch. Like I don't want something synthetic. This is a contrabass. It's cool. It just makes cool noises. Just real moody horror film almost. And these honestly aren't even like a main focal part of this section. They're just there purely to help build out the space. And kind of give you something to focus on during the build. There's not much going on in the vocal that's interesting here. And then down here, we actually have, this is going to be a main element of the drop, but I found this like guitar loop on Splice that I thought really fit the vibe of what I was trying to go for well. I want to say this is a Sullivan King guitar. It's just a cool little simple melody that's playing in the background through the build. Okay, the fun part, getting into the drop here. Coming into the drop, my biggest thing was how do I tone shift this from this intimate singer-songwriter vibe into a big festival level track that's carries a bunch of emotion, lots of really loud noises, and really plays around with the kind of organic and synthetic. Coming into the drop, there's this really cool thing that I love to do with vocals, and that is this vocal layer right here, which is this like really inorganic, crazy voice. And to do that, I'm literally just taking Little Altar Boy from Sound Toys and pitching all the way up and formatting all the way down. And it makes these really cool lead tones and textures with vocals. You'll hear it a lot of my stuff when I do vocal leads. It sounds really cool. It's reliable. I like it. I do it and everything. And then for the second one to kind of just fill it out, I have this like demonic distorted vocal, which I'm just getting with Capitator. This next little bit is actually one of my favorite parts of this song. Little just screech sound. That one right there. Which is actually, I had this random, I mean, you can see the name of it right there. I had this random synth loop that I found on Splice, and it had this one little screech in it I thought was really cool, so I cut that out. And I actually used that to transition, which worked very well, because it's very aggressive, it's very loud, it's very screechy. It really just sets the vibe for what's coming, I thought, very well. And then underneath that, I just have this little weird glitch texture to kind of give it a little more oomph. And then together, they're just like, can't even really hear this one, honestly. It's just there to help fill out kind of how it feels in your ears. I don't know how to make that make sense, but they're for texture. Okay, the fun part, getting into the drop. I'll let this play through and then, or at least the first section of it, and then we'll start going through and methodically breaking things down, because I think this is the section that everybody probably really wants to see. Okay, this was a ton of fun to make. I went through probably like 30 different drop iterations, and nothing was Nothing was really catching my ear. Nothing was really working. I tried Future Bass. I tried a couple different dubstep iterations. I tried a bass house iteration. Nothing quite hit the vibe that I was going for. And then one day just sat down and started writing this drop, and the contrast between the beginning section and part of the song really resonated with me. For me, I imagine this kind of like the singer lashing out and just letting off a lot of anger, because the whole first verse is all about like, God, it's over, I miss you, I have this like sinking feeling, I feel dark, I feel awful. And I was like, okay, how do I capture that in synthetic? So the first layer, we're seeing another one of those synth loops make an appearance, and it's this really cool, like colory textured synth loop that I found that just really resonated with me for some reason. Yeah, okay, so there was like this little 30, or not 30, like 4 or 5 second snippet of this synth patch that sounded really cool. And I decided that I wanted to kind of build around that glitchy, destructive, kind of falling apart feeling, especially with this being like the big resolution of the song and what it's about. Being a very personal track written from my perspective, I've had a lot of anger around what this track is about, and this felt like a really cathartic way to kind of just lash out and be angry for a minute and do that in a healthy environment that isn't going to hurt somebody, and like cool song comes out of it. So that's kind of what's going on with this drop. It's a bit of a temper tantrum from me, honestly, towards well, somebody, but anyway, getting off topic. So this little synth patch, I literally just cut it up, retimed it. I have a multiband going on it. It's not doing anything interesting. It's just to kind of make the sound the way I want it to be. The next main focal point of this drop is going to be this guitar loop that kind of swells in and out and in and out and in and out and keeps coming back, and it does a lot to really help drive the fluidity and the energy of the drop, and give you something that's kind of constant to latch onto while all of the basses and stuff are going. And then I think this is another print of the same guitar. Yeah, this is just a cleaner take. um I think there's actually some cool stuff going on. So as you can see, I've got a, I didn't do this. I did do this big group. A little messy. Anyway, let's get into this. We'll go into the group processing of everything. First things first, there's this, you already played it for you, the basic guitar layer, which just has some crazy ass EQ that I dragged around until it sounded the way I wanted it to. I was having issues with certain frequencies poking through too much and some not enough. So there's this crazy ass weird EQ curve here that I never sounds good. And then decapitator is just a little bit of distortion to kind of fuck it up and make it a little bit unstable. And then for the second layer, there is just another EQ going on, another decapitator, and I wanted this like really fuzzy, like the amps blown out kind of textury kind of thing going on. And then for the group processing, it's just reverb, and I'm running them into a limiter from there, EQing out the lows that got introduced from processing and whatnot. I have Vocal Writer on here, which is a weird one, I know. I was running into this issue where I was having almost this surging, uncontrollable issue with the dynamic range of the guitar. It just felt too quiet in some sections, too loud in some sections. If you're not familiar with Vocal Writer, what it does is it automatically goes in and it's a fade writer. It just turns the volume up and down to kind of keep the sound at the same volume. It's essentially a manual compressor. And that's what this is doing here. Like, I can let this run. And you can see it's just, especially on these louder sections, it makes it so much easier to balance things. I don't know that this would work in another situation, but it worked here. And back and forth between the basses and the guitar, I thought was really cool. And it makes like almost for this conversation back and forth between sections. And then in this, I have on 104. Okay, so every time this glitch texture plays, I have both of these just sidechained to that a little bit differently from each. I'm just sidechaining to these to that synth hit, because I really, 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 really wanted this like the focal of this section in tandem with the bass design. But this was like my core idea that I was building around, and I really wanted it present and upfront. So I'm sidechaining a lot of things to it, just to let it stand out more, which is actually a trick I picked up from Sayazan in his track Neo Soul. He Does this really interesting thing back and forth where he plays around with sidechains a lot, and one section the bass will be present, one section the saws will be present, and it just really resonated with me, and it makes this really cool moving texture that's like nothing is ever constantly the same volume. It's all playing off of each other and feeding into each other, which I thought was a really cool concept, and I built a portion of this track around that idea. So that's what's going on there. Really recommend you go listen to that song if you haven't heard it. It's fantastic. It has been a huge inspiration for a lot of my work lately. That guy's a legend. He makes really fucking cool mid tempo. Into the next section. This is honestly doesn't even really serve a purpose anymore. It does, kind of. But I have all of these little string sections because I wanted to pull an instrument from the beginning and bring it into the drop. And I'll play them all together first. And again, like the guitar, these are not there to be focused on. This is there to fill out small little texture gaps that were missing in my drop. These are all just kind of neat little resampled. I don't, and yeah, there we go. That's, yep. We'll get into that in a second. For the first grouping of strings, we literally just have, yeah, the contrabass. I brought that back in again. I really like the tone. I think it's cool, and it helped round out the tops of the mid bass a lot. I don't know. It's just a neat texture layer. I thought it was cool. It's a little Easter egg that's in the background of the drop, I guess. Not really anything interesting going on with this batch of strings. It's just strings that play in the quieter sections of the drop. This one I'm proud of. This was a goofy experiment. Oh, I gotta remember. Okay, so my starting sound for this was these like just warm cellos. And I was bored and seeing what weird things I could do to things. It goes from just a regular basic contrabass and cello to this like make this louder. This really cool like textury, almost unnatural sounding cello, um, which I thought was neat. And I thought it was silly that it took all of this to do that and like sounds the same. I don't know. I was bored. I was really bored. But I'm just doing a crazy ass EQ to bring a bunch of the highs out because they're both low octave instruments, straight into a compressor to kind of balance everything back out. And make those highs more kind of in line with where the lows are. I add a mono switch here. I don't know. Oh yeah, I'm forcing this to mono. Then I'm hossing it with a just straight up normal Hoss delay. I have another utility that is forcing everything after the Hoss back to mono so that the low end frequencies, I'm forcing these back to mono to intentionally cause them to have a phase breakdown. And then I'm pushing that further with another Haas effect that automates on and off based off which parts of the sound I want to accentuate at different times. So like, don't really remember how I figured this out, but basically I found out if you automate this on and off, I can switch back and forth between like this low weird tone and this like the kind of like higher ranger tone. I really don't know how to describe this, what's going on here, but it's that back and forth between the low and high, and I this made it do that, so I have that just on the toggle on and off. Another EQ, some reverb, glue compressor, more EQ, utility knob that's just controlling the volumes throughout certain sections, LFO tool to bring that flutter in the higher sections, an OTT because I think it's funny to put it on things that shouldn't have it sometimes when they're not important features because everybody gets all mad about it, and it sounded cool and I liked the way the dispersion was. Into another compressor and then EQ. This is not how you should make this sound, but I was having fun. I wanted to experiment and a cool sound was born from it. Boring strings aside, the cool part. Let's get into the bass patches. And then from there we'll get into drums and we'll keep going. So the main focal element of the drop is this screech bass right here. Which I will, this is done in Vital. It is just a preset that I found that I really liked. I could take the time to sit here and go through everything that's going on, but for your sake and mine, PLA Machina, I think was the pack I got it from. Fuck around with stuff and you can get some cool noises from some other sounds. Into the processing, I have a reduce ambience to keep some of the unwanted noises down into an OTT, into a saturator, and then into Camel Crusher. This is a chain that is not necessarily the cleanest or best way to do anything, but I got this from Ray Volpe, and it just works. It's quick, it's easy, you don't have to think about it. There's better ways to do it, sure, but in the moment, that's what I grabbed, and I liked the way it sounded, so I kept running with it. Into cut out the sub here, and then these two will. The next main tone that's going on here is this kind of repeater layer, which is purely here to just support the glitchy textures. Like if I play those together, hang on. Refreeze things. Finally. It just fills out the bottom of the little glitches and adds another layer of texture to listen to, which I thought was neat. I am super, 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 super big into layering. I really enjoy doing it. I think it's really cool. You can craft some very unique sounds when you use multiple things to make one goal. That being said, it can get very out of hand very quickly. It's gonna like kill my computer if I try to freeze this. All right. So there's that layer. Anyway, back into it. The next thing we got going on, I have this just fuzz layer, and this is literally just a distorted saw wave. I'm using this here purely to give texture to the top of my basses, and kind of support the bridge between the bottom of the upper frequency elements and the bass ranges. I find bridging frequencies like that with single simple sounds works much better than trying to fill out every frequency range with something interesting. So it's just there for texture and support. This. Oh, yeah. Random laser noise that plays occasionally. That's just there every 4 hits for... I like putting elements that don't really do a lot, but you hear them in order to drive like the 1 and the 3, or keep your head kind of on time. And we'll get into more of why I'm doing this in a second when we go over the drums. But whenever I'm doing stuff with crazy timing and triplets and weird drum work, and I try to put things in that can keep the listener engaged, and that, okay, here's the beat of the song. It doesn't necessarily have to be off of the drums. If you get your listener to kind of naturally nod along to the rhythm you want them nodding on, you kind of have free range to do whatever you want. I find a lot of people get boxed in by this, like, my drums need to drive the song. No. Song drives the song, and everything else is there to supplement that. Into the main basses here. See, this is the 40 to 120 hertz stuff that I have. I have 2 basses working in tandem here. Oh yeah, I think this lane broke for some reason and I couldn't hear audio from it anymore. I duplicated my sub down. But the really big overblown hits are coming from these 2, which is just my sub bass. And another top layer. And that top layer is going into the Serum. It is just the acid preset in Serum 1 with a little bit of unison on it and some hyper for width and distortion to make it sound cool. Not a lot going on there. Into that, we're going to see this same chain again: reduce ambience, OTT, saturator, and camel crusher. Kind of a staple of my sound. I tend to do it a lot. Then we're going into another saturation knob, a kick tight, because I wanted a little bit of distortion, and a limiter. From there, I'm forcing everything to mono, EQing it again. I don't remember what that sidechain to, but it's the same principle as what was going on up here between the guitar and the glitch section. I'm just accentuating what's playing at what times. This is my favorite part, and I'll solo this out for a second. Are these like just really blown out, really over the top syncopated drums with like these weird off kicks and hits going on. It was kind of towards my era where I started playing around with drums more, and I've started gravitating more towards loud drums. So, first layer. Just a bunch of fucking hi-hats, man. There's not anything particularly interesting going on. It's Valhalla Vintage Verb, a glue compressor, and EQ to bring out the ranges that I wanted. And then I have that side change to the kick and snare. It's real simple. This thing's cool. I like this. I got this from Crankdat. These are just white noise hats that it's just a good simple ride. Like I said, this ties back into what I was talking about earlier of like simple elements that aren't focal that keep you kind of on time with whatever's going on, which gets really important when we start messing around with like some of the weird triple kicks and stuff. Because typically when people follow the kick snare and you throw 4 kicks at them, their head's gonna kind of do that for a second and they're like, okay, wait, I'm lost. So having smaller little things that keep time instead of just one focal element, I've found tends to give a cooler feel. For my kick, I'm little kick enhancer. I use this on pretty much all of my drop kicks. I know it says AU5, that's what I have it named. Doing Ableton's acoustic kick compressor preset because I really like what it does to kicks most of the time. I'll kind of fiddle with settings on a per use basis. Into drum bus, I'm adding drive, crunch, and then it's got this really cool thing called boom, which if I turn this off, this is what the kick drum sounds normally. It's very like dubsteppy, sharp, short. What boom does is it adds almost like a reverb effect, or it kind of extends the tail of your kick a little bit, and I get this really cool like blown out kind of sound. You can hear like it's almost like there's a sub hit with the kick, which was something I was intentionally going for. I don't actually know what that's doing or why that's there. I think I was playing around with something, but that doesn't need to be there. And then I'm just pushing it into a limiter to keep it from affecting my mastering chain too much. This is not something I would do, but in this situation, I really, really, really wanted my like as loud as possible of a kick. So that's what I'm doing. I'm driving it as hard as I can into a limiter, and then that limiter is just there to keep it from kind of engaging too much with my mastering rack. So that's its sole purpose is just controlling the sound before it gets to final processing. For the snare here, big old super snare going on. This is the extra fun tidbits. Made a big ass snare. It grabbed a lot of layers. You can see I've turned the volume way the fuck down. I just ran these as loud as I possibly could into their specific tracks and then worked with them at the group level. EQ to keep the low end out, and I'm just compressing the ever loving shit out of them. Just make this big, like, all of sound snare, and then I have, yeah, this was the original snare. And it just wasn't big enough for me. So I was like, all right, how do I make this cooler? And now there's this massive ass snare layer to kind of complement the huge kick drum. And then the layers themselves are just snare, another higher pitched kind of metallic snare, a big ass thonk for a stick transient. I liked the click in that one. It complements the metallic layer really nicely, so those two kind of play together well. And then just a big cashmere, like obnoxious ass snare tail. And you get like this big just wall of noise. For the drum timing, so I think one of the things that makes this track really cool is it does not follow a traditional drum pattern for something like, and especially when I was doing the triplets for basses, I was like, okay, well, I kind of want to play back and forth between this like almost frantic freak out feeling. Controlled rage is pretty much what I was going for. But back to what I was talking about. So this kick pattern. Put this back up. So you'll hear that there's all these little triple kicks and double hits and like weird little snare hits. I really wanted to toy with the idea that your drums don't have to be so structured. If you're doing enough with background elements, you don't necessarily need to follow the rules. when it comes to making drums. And I find unconventional drums to be far more interesting to listen to. So that's what I'm doing through here. And then really just kind of leaning into that massive blown out kick, the massive snare, all of the just harsh, screechy noises. I thought it made a cool combination. Other people clearly seem to agree with me. Um, that's kind of my mentality when building that drop. Into the second section, there's this, again, just cutting up random samples I found to make cool transition sounds. I've got that sound going on, which is kind of, I wanted to echo off of the opening sound because it really is like you're getting into this drop and it's like, it's such a tone shift. And I thought that this element was really cool. I personally think it's one of the coolest sounds in the track. So I'm just nodding back to that here. And I'm also playing off of that really big kick, really aggressive side chain. Like the two interact very interestingly together. And I'm just really continuing to lean into this idea of every element builds off of everything else and serves a purpose. Nothing is here accidentally. It's all moving and organic and working with each other instead of fighting for space. Like here you get this really cool relationship between the kick and the screech that like just kind of pulls you out for a second and it's like, whoa, that's a cool fucking sound, and then drops you right back into it. And then here I have another one that I cut up and fucked with to make it fit. And that's just this like cool, like, oh, okay, we're doing something different here. Like almost like a clue, like, hey, the triplet section's done. I'm switching it up. Here's a new sound. I bring that vocal back in again with the really demonic kind of distorted sound. And it's like, hey, we're about to go deep. Like, I'm going to take this another step further, which brings me into my favorite sound in this entire track. And it's so fucking simple. This was an accident. I didn't mean to do this. I had no real direction where I was going. I was trying stuff, but I'll let this play out and then I'll go into it the second half of the drop. Okay, so this sound specifically right here, I thought was the coolest fucking thing ever. It sounds like a weird whale. I loved it. I ended up building portions of the drop around it so that I could specifically have this sound, and literally all it is it's this screech layer right here. And I am running it through one of the presets in Portal that's I think under stretch and smear, and it makes this just real cool underwater texture effect. Which I thought was a really neat way to kind of start dissipating energy out of the drop. Really interesting to listen to. It's really cool. It's not high energy. And it's kind of like, okay, we're getting to the end here. We're wrapping this drop up. Here's a new sound. I want you to pay attention still. But like I need to move on to the next section of the song. So this is me kind of signaling you out. And like you get it's just a really cool contrast between like this really aggressive section that's not gonna play. Like, in your face, high, just irritated, and then like alright, we're slowing down. The drums kind of drop into a more natural pattern. And it brings us back into our second verse. Last cool thing I'm doing here, actually. Crankdead has this really cool rack that he calls his easy transition rack. I'm lucky enough I've gotten my hands on it. All this is doing is a filter, redux, chorus, and there's a rising or atonal kind of sweeping tone. I don't know why that word was eluding me. I use this a lot. It's a really cool way to transition out. I'm a huge fan of redux. I love it. I think it's such a cool sound. And it lets me kind of ring the drop out for a few more seconds in this kind of like dark, distorted, echoey kind of hellscape type thing. If I solo it out, it just leaves this really cool tail on the end of the drop that I really like. And if you pay attention to my tracks, you'll notice I tend to do that a lot. Everything going on here. For the second verse, I'll probably focus a little more on the vocals this time because there's going on. Instrumentation, not much changes. There is drum group here. I've got a couple more hi-hats going on. Nothing too glaringly drastic, just enough to be interesting. It's like, hey, there's some new stuff. I've refreshed this original idea. Come back in. I stick to the same. I go right back into that. This is intimate. This is personal. You're looking into a moment in somebody's life that's very private and very emotional and very raw. And I wanted to just kind of keep that vibe going, which is exactly what I'm doing here. Yeah, this right here. I just took a section of the ARP that I like, pitched it around, used them as kind of like little transitional effects, and then I bring the ARP up an octave here to make it interesting again. Percussion loop in here just to keep things interesting and moving along. Not much changes until we get into the next break. So before we get into that section, let's go over a couple of things that are going on with the vocal here, because I haven't quite gotten into this yet. This layer right here, which is, again, just that, or no, I'm using vocal synth for this one. I think this is BioVox. But I just wanted to really lean into this is a dreamscape. Everything's really glitchy. It's really falling apart, losing my mind. So it's just a weird, unnatural, distorted vocal that I thought was cool, and it's just echoing off of main vocal. I solo these. It's just a cool little back and forth. I'm making my own manual delay, pretty much. I have a really just kind of dark, not quite coming through reverb layer, and that's just in tandem with this to kind of add this extra little voice in the background. Because I thought I was kind of going for almost this like there's people in my head kind of vibe. I imagine this section being a singer kind of arguing back and forth with themselves. Again, a lot of this is audio representation of trials and stuff that I've gone through myself. And I'm just trying to convey that crazy, fucked up, God, my head doesn't feel right emotion. So that's all those are doing. Getting into the next section, happy note, we get into the next build. And the only thing different in this one than the last one is in this one you'll notice I drop everything except for the piano and the orchestral stuff out. I felt like I had too much energy going to do that here, so I just leave all of the instrumentation. It's a different build, it's a different break. It sounds a little new, even though it's stuff you've been listening to the whole song. Just kind of present some of the sounds in a different package, almost. So, again, we've got that back and forth between the orchestral drums and the instrumentation. And then we see this vocal kind of get a lot more tension. And this is just like demon on the shoulder. It's starting to get back into the drop. That's about all that's going on there. And here it's all about the same. Get into another orchestral build. The strings come back in. And then this section here, this fake out. So I spent a lot of this track giving the piano a lot of focus and attention, and I really wanted to kind of give the ARP melody a bit of attention because it's very haunting. It practically carries the vibe of the song, honestly. It would not remotely be the same thing without it. So I kind of just try to show it some love here, and that gets to ring out. The strings come back in a little bit, and then I'm doubling down on the glitchy vibe. Again, putting resampling and splice to work. I've got what is just this. I basically put this into a new lane. Kind of brought it back down to a quieter, more texture, almost glitch level. And I layered that in underneath because huge vocal element, and I'm building around it quite a bit. So you get this like really cool little fake out that's like, wait one sec. You get this really cool fake out that's like, okay, wait, what the fuck is about to happen? And then everything kind of swells back up. And then we have this little, where are you? This little vocal. Um, this is just the vocoder setting. I threw it on and turned something on and was like, oh, that works for what I want to do. So there's not much thought that went into that one. For the second drop, there is a bit of a tone shift here that I mean, I made the song. I think everything's really, but there's a tone shift here that really just kind of feels very different from the first drop, while still staying true to it. And that is all of these little vocal takes right here. And I kind of accidentally stumbled on this while just dragging stuff around. But at one point I had this vocal slightly off time. And this like, God, I think I miss you rang out of the mix. And I was like, what the I had a vocal in a weird spot just from when I was comping and stuff. And I was like, wait, what is that? That sounds awesome. Um and I decided to build around that for the second drop. I wanted to drop the original idea of toying with glitches and triplets and instead now focus around what is an extremely intimate moment with the vocalist, and at the same time having this kind of be the penultimate climax of the song. Like, you've sat here for 2 minutes and listened to this girl go back and forth with an internal struggle, and this is her final last cry out of like, fuck, this sucks, I miss you, this hurts, like I don't know what to do with this. And it felt very raw when I heard it the first time, and very like not traditional to what you would normally expect, which I love to do. I love to circumvent genre rules and traditional thinking. um so I took that and ran with it, and I wound up making this whole vocal layer, which I'll get into everything in a second. But uh, so this kind of becomes what this drop centers around. And it's just a cool take on the vocal. This doesn't even have any, this is just the raw vocal. And I'm pushing it until it clips a little bit to give it some, just an interesting flavor of distortion. I've got this vocal, which is the same vocal pitched up and run through decapitator. So it's just an octave up. And then I have this layer, which is frozen and bounced, but this is Little Alter Boy again, only this time I'm only using the pitch knob, I'm not using the formant knob. And then these little shots right here, which are just there for filler. It's a little more reverbed, a little louder version of the original vocal. And you'll hear actually on this section, I do this across all three. I just don't remember because they're all bounced right now. But I am going in with Little Alter Boy in places and doing that. Just playing with pitching, playing with formatting. How do I make this voice sound different every time it hits? So like, you get these cool high pitched hits, which also, stay in a minute, play really nicely off the basses. And again, like once you solo this out and you just listen to everything, it's just this big like, the voice has become an instrument almost. I'm not really focused on what she's saying outside of the God, I think I miss you. I'm more so texture and voices and kind of the overwhelming feeling of it all is what I focused on through this. Which I will let this play out now, and you can kind of get a full picture of that. As for the rest of the instrumentation goes, I have a couple sections where the ARP comes in a little bit, and I think that's about the only difference. Everything else sticks true to that triplet setup with the back and forth with the vowels and the guitars. I didn't want to add any new elements because I wanted you to focus on the vocalist. So I'm just doing the same drop again, but almost like a VIP of it, which I love to do. I love I love when a song drops in and your listener knows what to expect and still gets blown away, which is exactly what I was trying to do here. Especially coming out of this glitch section, you get just this loud "God, I think I miss you" ring out, and then you get that cool screech drop in again, and you're right back into the thick of it. But there's something new to focus on now, and it's not what you expected. Again, with the drums, I'm just doing questionable drum patterns, couple to snare double hits, couple flam hits. And really everything in this section, all of the timings, all of the drum hits, where bass shots are placed, it all just centers around all in responsing with this vocal. So I'll let this run out. Like even down to like, so this triple hit right here. This triple hit is just accentuating the next big vocal hit. You're not following the drums anymore. You're following the flowing, moving feeling of the vocal. You're doing something different. Like I said, I love doing stuff like this. I think more people should do it. My take. But if you listen, everything is centered around driving that vocal forward. The vocal is the drop. All of the instrumentation, all of the drum work, everything else, none of it matters anymore. The vocal is the center. Everything complements that, and you get this really cool, big, awesome space that I just fell in love with, and could not wait to release and put out into the world. Yeah, same sounds, same patterns, but just different. Even like, so right here, another example of just everything playing off of each other. That little vocal hit that we were looking at earlier acts as a almost reverse hit into the next kick drum, which feeds into the vocal, which feeds into the triplet screech, which feeds into the weird fucked up whale noises. It's all working together to accomplish one goal, and that goal is to convey how absolutely fucking miserable this poor girl is. And just how much of this pent up frustration and anger she has. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit of a journaling moment for me. I let some stuff out. I forged it into this drop, and it can stay there forever now, and I don't ever have to think about it again. Second half of the drop, same concept. And then, coming into the outro here, I really wanted to just bring back this concept of this haunting person that doesn't exist. So, just returning to the original concept, you hear, I'll let it play through. So you see this piano get brought back almost in a different light though. I'm not doing, oh yeah. I've taken the imaging down. I've brought it back to a little bit more natural sound. And you get a lot more kind of weird room noises, and you can hear some of the background breathing and soft little textures that are really cool. Which I thought was a nice intimate way to close it out. And then you've just got the vocal reiterating this. You're a ghost, you don't exist, you're not real, but I can't get you out of my head. I really wanted that haunting feeling to sit with the listener at the end. And I do believe that brings us to the end of going through everything. The only thing I think I didn't cover on was the group processing drop vocals, which is just an EQ. It works. And then I'm sidechaining them slightly different from everything else in the drop. You can see they're grouped as their own thing here. That's just, it's not even by much. It's slightly different timings, so the vocal rings out before the instruments do. And I'm talking like microseconds of difference. Very much a case of how obsessed do you want to get over how this sounds, which is what I did in that situation. Sorry, S's are hard. As for that, I think nope, that's about all of the cool stuff that's going on here. Into final processing and mastering. This is my favorite part of working on a track personally. I love taking everything up to final polish most of the time when it doesn't go horribly wrong. First things first, I want to talk about how I have things routed here. You'll see I have some sends down here, and you'll see the submaster channel, which has all of my mastering on it, and then a main out, which is a bit confusing, so let's go over that. So the way I have my template set up is I have my I use this almost like a direct out channel. This is not, there's no mastering actually happens on the mastering rack. The only thing I have here the mono switch so I can flip back and forth and check for phase issues, and this G clip to catch anything that for some reason makes it past my mastering rack. And that's just, this doesn't even ever really do anything. It's here purely for security and peace of mind. And I'll get into why in a second. There's a very specific way I like to limit, but getting off topic. You'll see that there's this submaster channel. And what this allows me to do is I can essentially route all of my sends direct out. So I can either make sends within the mastering rack that get put into the final post-processing, or I can bypass my mastering rack altogether and send a clean, untouched audio signal out to the master, out behind my limiter. What I'm doing here is how do I put this? Carefully handcrafting the room and space that the song takes place in. So you'll see I have a couple things here. I have reverbs, this thing that I have titled the room widener, a mono reverb layer for the vocal, which I'll get into in a minute. My snare reverb, because I did not want the snare is a really big focal point of the drop. I did not want my big dramatic tail getting phase issues, pressed, altered in any way. It was exactly how I liked it, and I did not want the mastering chain to affect that, so I'm routing it outside of my mastering chain. You'll see I do this with drums and stuff too in other breakdown videos. Like I'll pull entire drum channels out and just have them be direct out to avoid phasing issues and stuff. But getting into the room wideners, this is controversial, and I'm sure that people are going to have things to say about it. But if you look here, this one is titled Room Widener Intro. This soloed out sounds like this. Wait, let me get back to this. So what's going on here is I am using a feature in Pro C2 under the sidechain tab that lets you compress by specific stereo band. So in this case, I am compressing all of the mids of the intro and accentuating. What that's essentially doing is it's bringing the volume of all of the mids down and leaving the sides. And it makes this really cool wide room effect that I don't always use, but I'll do a before and after here real quick. So without it, a little more intimate. I wanted a really big, huge, almost hall space. When I flip this on, you'll hear the sides change. And you start getting like, it's almost like you've taken a stereo imager and slapped it on everything, but you're not fucking with frequency bands the way that a stereo imager would. And I have found in my case, it's a really cool way to, in some settings, add a little bit more room feeling to something, make it feel a little bigger, a little wider, a little more echoey, which is exactly what I'm doing here. Like again, if I solo this out, yeah, I don't know. I'll dry wet it again, and you can hear for yourself, and you can decide if that's something that you want to play around with. I do it. I like it. I think it's cool. I've been gatekeeping the fuck out of it, and first formal setting where I'm like, hey, there's this cool thing I found, which is not new by any means. I mean, mid-side compression has been around for ages, but I don't see many people doing this specific thing, so I figured I'd. But again, that dry wet is. I'll wait for the piano to come in. A little more narrow, a little more intimate. And it just, I don't know, it pulls some stuff out in the sides that I really like. And I'm doing it in the drop too. Like without it, the drop just hits like so. Which is a little more mono, a little more narrow than how it is in release. With the stereo imager, it flings some more of the high end out to the side. I find it to be a very nice way to get highs out a little bit further, get the tops of your synths out a little bit further. Because if I go into here, I'm cutting out all of the low end. So the low end's unaffected. And it's acting only on the mid to highs, and it just stood out a little further. It makes a cool sound that I like, and I've been doing a lot lately. So I don't care if it's right or wrong. I like it. I think it's cool. Again, you can see I have an EQ. I'm not touching the low end frequencies. I don't want to fuck with the stereo of that. But in this setting, a lot of the higher range stuff are not central focal elements that flung out to the sides. They can be a little artifacty. They can be a little fucked up. They don't have to be perfect. So I'm choosing to take possibly introducing issues with my stereo space and in exchange for what ultimately sounds like a cooler product, and I'm just kind of knowingly making that decision. It's kind of the same logic as putting OTT on your master. I know there's better ways to do this, but I like it, and it's unique, and it's something that only I'm doing, and it sounds good, so I've kind of stuck with it and been refining it. This was kind of the first formal iteration where I've tried to do it, so it's a little less clean than it could be, but like with it turned back on, you get this, you get a little more hi-hat action, you get a little more of the like texture from the highs thrown out to the side. It's really cool. I think it's neat. Getting into reverbs here. Section. This is just full wet, really dark, haunting. I've hossed to this to keep them keep it out of the center space so it doesn't conflict with the vocal. Not a focal element. My side chains. And this is just kind of giving an eerie, haunting tone to the piano. So, like, if I go solo the piano out, here's that piano normally, and it's small, it's cramped, it's got this really great intimate feeling to it, it's got a lot of texture to it, but it's like really small. So this is just adding that, again, building on that big, haunting, eerie spatial setting. Just really does wonders to bring some of the character out of the piano. This one is a neat trick that I found from somebody. This is a full wet reverb throw on the lead vocal. Let me solo that out. Here's the bass vocal. Here it is with that reverb, mono reverb layer. It adds this cool haunting feeling behind the vocal. I saw someone suggest this in a cinematic subreddit where they're like, I want my instruments to sound more haunting. And somebody was like, oh yeah, throw a mono reverb on it. So I was like, all right, fuck it, try it. It wound up sounding cool. It fit the vibe for what I was going for perfectly. So I ran with it. Last but not least, we have the mastering for the project. I do mix and master all of my own tracks. It's all my handiwork. I don't outsource anything. It has taken me over 10 years to get to this point. So I know a lot of people that watch feedback videos and like breakdown videos and stuff. You're studying other people's stuff. You're comparing yourself to a lot of people. You're trying to achieve a sound. Don't get stressed out by this stuff. It comes with time. You have to learn how to hear these things. There's no real way that I can teach how to process by ear, but I'm going to try to get into this a little bit. I explain at least what everything's doing, why I have it there. Because again, everything with my music is incredibly intentional. I'm always making trade-offs of what is this plugin going to do? What artifacts is it going to introduce? What is this going to do to my sound? And is that worth what I'm trying to achieve? So you'll see some decisions made in this chain. Might not work in your case. They might not be for you. They might not work with your sound style. For me, they do, and this is why I'm doing it. Starting off into my mastering chain, I run my first thing I do ever is I turn the gain of everything down by 10 dB. I like to produce loud. A lot of my tracks are coming out red. We're talking, I have some channels that are coming in 7 to 11 dB over clip, like not super conducive to trying to get a clean master. I'm also lazy and don't like to go through and adjust everything down and sit there for 7 hours and be like, okay, this needs to be at 2.4 dB, this needs to be at 6. I just turn everything down 10. When I'm producing, you see this is deactivated right now. I produce into a G clip, so I know when stuff's hitting clip that's unacceptable. I can hear it. So by the time I get to mastering, stuff already sounds pretty decent. So there's no real. I mix and produce at the same time. There's no real need to go back through and change the levels of everything. If something's clipping and it sounds good, it's clipping and it sounds good. And this kind of lets me do that because I know a lot of people run into an issue where they won't put some sort of clipper on their master while they're working, and then they'll go to the mixing and mastering stage and suddenly nothing's working. You put a compressor on, everything goes to shit, everything's distorted, it sounds awful, you can't figure out what's going on. This eliminates that. Compose into clippers, it's great. You'll know when you're going too fucking loud, you'll know when you're going just the right amount of loud, and you'll know when you're not going loud enough. It is brain dead easy, and I'll get into another reason why I do this later on in the chain, because you just see it that I do have a clipper before my limiter. I like composing into clippers. I think it's a good idea. I think it simplifies the process, which once you get to this level, everything is about process, simplifying things, doing things efficiently. That's all this is. Saving me time. It's smart, works. Try it. Trust me, it'll change your life. Great. Anyway, that off tangent ran out of the way. Let's get into this. So, like I said, there's that 10 dB gain reduction because I'm lazy, and I'm also doing that so that my mastering plugins, things aren't just slamming in at the red, because you will get artifacting and distorting from that. And while it may have been intentional at the production stage, I'm starting to get into the surgical side of stuff where I don't want the sound being affected a whole lot unless I want it being affected. So bringing your volume levels down gives you more room to work with. It forces you to listen to the track at a quieter level and get a new perspective on it. It's a really good idea. First thing in the chain, I enjoy this preset for dubstep, especially if I've been kind of messy in mixing and not necessarily gone through and compressed everything properly. And this is an older track too. I have different things that I do now, but at the time I was using this preset a lot. It's mixed in at 50% wet in a parallel. I've got it in dynamic phase mode, so I don't have to deal with the issue with filter splits. Forgot to turn on oversampling. From there, we're going into a Pro Q3, which there's this preset called general purpose balancing. It's up to you if you want to do stuff like this. I was really, really, really stereo focused this whole track was about stereo space for me. I was challenging myself to try new things. I was trying to get better at making stereo spaces. That's all this is doing. It's just further accentuating the stereo. I don't recommend getting into all of this shit unless you know what you're doing. You don't need this. This is hyper intentional autistic obsessive at its peak. There's no need to be doing shit like this on your master if you don't know what you're doing. And even then, I'm sitting here looking back on it and I'm like, this was a decision I don't know that I would make nowadays. Because this is an older track. This was made almost 2 years ago. And then I basically brought it up to my new standards and it got released. From there, we're into a 20 hertz cutoff. I don't recommend doing this almost ever. However, in this situation, because of how I was processing my kick, because I was doing the weird reverbed out thing, because of how the low end in this track is specifically set up to do and serve a specific function, I'm doing a 20 hertz cut here. This will kill your low end if you're not careful. This little slope right here won't be able to hear what it's doing. You won't be able to hear the damage, but it will fuck up your low end. I don't recommend doing this unless, like I said in this case, you are specifically chasing a sound. Everybody recommends doing this. Don't fucking do it. I know it's on my track. I know I did it here. For the love of God, don't do this. It will fuck your shit up. Like I said earlier, a lot of my producing is weighing those pros and cons. In this case, what I was trying to achieve, which I'm not even going to get into because I don't want people doing this, had a specific purpose. I don't want to encourage people to do this, so I'm not going to. That's that section over. Don't fucking do it. From here, another controversial decision. I'm using a multiband compressor to basically tame how fucking intense the kick drum is. All this is doing is this is just acting on the low frequencies. And even then, there's one or two moments where I had these crazy spikes in the low end, which will happen from doing this. And this is there just to control that. It's to keep it from overwhelming my clipper and my limiter. Again, not something I would really recommend doing. In this one specific niche case, it was applicable. That being said, getting into more of the traditional stuff that I do almost every track. This half of my chain is kind of something that I've established for myself as how I like to master tracks. I've got, you're even still on, you're not doing anything. Toyed around with the idea of using a Fletcher Munson EQ, wound up not using it. I don't know, every time I try to use them, it just fucks shit up because I'm usually already mixing as I go, and then I throw a Fletcher Munson curve on, and I'm like, okay, cool, I can't hear anything in that range. On more intense tracks and stuff, sometimes it has its place, or if you're chasing a very specific mastering and mixing style, it has its place. Getting into what has very quickly become one of my favorite plugins, I have IDX Intelligent Dynamics. This is a spectral compressor. It is not remotely designed for mastering. It works just fine, but you run the risk of introducing a lot of artifacts and really fucking shit up, so you have to be very careful with it. But in IDX, there's this preset called Vocal to the Front, which accentuates the higher end of your mid-range, where natural fundamentals for vocals would typically sit. It kind of focuses on that range and brings those up and kind of pushes stuff in the mix a little further back. I don't even like saying pushes back. Accentuates the vocal. It will always prioritize accentuating things that lie in the frequency of most vocals, which I find to be a cool sound. Which I'll turn this off. This is what it sounds like. I passed. Which, like, it's fine. With it on, I just find it to be a really nice polish tool. A lot of times you have to play around with your mix settings and the big knob. But I've found this to be a really cool... I've found this to be a really cool tool for getting a very specific vocal forward sound. It also, in non-vocal sections, does some neat stuff to frequency ranges that typically would be kind of the driving sound of the section. So like through the drop, this is without, with, so this is a twofold of just, it's compressing things, so things sound better. There's almost like you could graph out how compressible something is with how good it sounds, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. That's what this is doing. It's a spectral compressor. I'm targeting specific frequency bands. My brand in particular tends to focus around a lot of specific things. That's one of them. From there, we're going into Ozone Imager, which I'm doing really questionable shit here. My whole goal for this track was to break myself out of my funk and subvert things that you normally wouldn't do. And I'm sure somebody is going to take a look at the stereo width that I have on the low end there, gonna say something about it. In response, I say, I don't care, really shouldn't do it, but I did it here, and it sounds good, and I like it. Do as I say, not as I do. Don't do shit like that unless you're doing it intentionally, know what you're doing. Period. As for the other frequency bands, tiny stereo nudge to the mid-range, a little bit bigger nudge to kind of where more of the character frequencies of sounds lie. And then I like just cranking the stereo out of cranking the shit out of the stereo for my highs. I'm sure people are gonna argue with me and be like, that's not good, you shouldn't do that. I don't care. I like it. It sounds cool. That's how I do it. It's an established sound that I've defined for myself now. And then from there into a dynamic EQ, which is just controlling a few spots that I could not get to sit right during the mastering section. From there, I don't know why there's an EQ8 on here. I think I was doing a high shelf. Next, we go into Gullfoss. This is not something I recommend going out and buying. I use it as a polish tool. As I've said multiple times, I've made some decisions in this processing for this track that are very messy, and I've made some questionable mixing choices. What Gullfoss does is it basically analyzes your audio and takes frequencies that it thinks are being masked or not coming through that should be coming through, and it brings them to the front. But I don't really know how to explain Gullfoss. It's something you'd have to look into. This is not an essential tool. It's not doing a whole lot. This is like final nitpicky polish type stuff. So there's not even any real reason into going into this. I don't use this a whole lot. It just happened to work well on this track. It is a cool tool. I recommend you look into it. I'm not saying you need to go out and buy it. From there, every track I do has this clipper limiter set up. And essentially what I'm doing is I take the loudest part of my drop, and I just sit there with the input gain knob and I turn it up until it sounds good. Sometimes that's a little, sometimes that's a lot. And what this is also doing is bringing the volume back up from that -10 dB drop that we did in the beginning. From there, after the clipper, we're going into FabFilter, and I am slamming the shit out of this song. Which, like, it is just completely fucking flat. And this actually lets me get back into what I'm doing over here with this G clip. So what this double master setup essentially lets me do is, with Pro L specifically, it's got a preset called transparent. And what this does is it lets a little bit of your transients through before actually engaging the limiter, at least to my understanding. And it preserves the transients of your sounds a lot better than traditional limiting has, in my experience. So what I'm doing is I'm essentially letting harmonics make it, or not harmonics, these transients make it past my limiter, and I'm catching them in the end with G-clip here. And that is what this is here for. This is here so that I can be a lot more aggressive at this stage with how I'm doing stuff without worrying about what it's going to sound like in final. Like, I know what it's going to sound like in final. I have the clipper here. I can hear what's going on. This keeps me from having that scenario where it's like, okay, this sounds great, and then I export it and it's clipped to shit and I'm mad. But yeah, that's pretty much. This was a little disorganized. This is the first time I've done one of these. So these will get better as time goes on. I have many more of these planned for the future. But that's about it. This has been Little Ghost. Full breakdown. If you guys have any questions, by all means, leave a comment. Ask me things. I'm more than happy to answer. I'm sure there's stuff I didn't cover here. I'm sure there's things you guys are going to ask about. So by all means, please do that. But without further ado, this has gotten far too long, and I need to go edit it now. So take care, enjoy. Let me know if there's any other tracks specifically that you want broken down, different approaches to breakdowns in the future, like maybe talk more about this, talk less about that. Let me know what you guys like. I will cater this to you and what you're looking for. If you want me to talk more about the mixing and less about the production, I can do that. If you want me to talk more about the production, less about the mixing, I can do that too. And if there's any specific songs you want to see breakdowns for, by all means, let me know. I will happily. At some point, I will probably be uploading this project file or stems or something to my Patreon. Keep an eye out for that. It's free. I don't charge people for my Patreon. Without further ado, thanks. You made it this far. And I will see you in the next one.